Blindspotting, 2018 film starring David Dix and Rafael Casal. It's a comedy drama taking place in Oakland about a black guy named Colin who is on his final 3 days of probation after serving his jail term. If he manages to make it through those 3 days without any problems, he's a free man again. If he has any altercation on the law, with the law on the other hand, he goes to jail again. So Colin does his best to avoid trouble. He lives at a halfway home for ex-cons and tries to abide by the curfew. He drives carefully and follows the rules on the road, and he also works at a moving company together with his buddy Miles. On the first night of those 3 days, when returning home from work, Colin witnesses a cop shoot another young black guy to death. And then the story goes from there, focusing largely on Colin's relationship with his buddy Miles and the way that they both are, versus the way that they are seen or perceived by strangers. Colin is the much calmer one. He's more easygoing. He's mostly just trying to live his life and not get in trouble. But because he's a black guy with dreads in Oakland, he has to constantly deal with being looked at as a potential threat or even criminal. On the other hand, we have Miles, who is white but acts sort of black, largely due to, of course, growing up in a black neighborhood in Oakland and always being friends with Colin and other black people, breathing in that culture, as it were. He likes to rap, he dresses up and behaves like black people. And crucially, he also tends to be pretty aggressive and violent in his language and behavior. He's very much a troublemaker, but again, because he's white, he always seems to get more leeway from the people around him. And especially whenever the two hang together, Colin would be the first one to blame for whatever mischief Miles causes. And that's the gist of the film. The contrast between what we see on the outside and how people actually really are. Those blind spots of their personalities that we may not see. For Colin, this also goes way deeper than that, for reasons which I won't spoil, but the racial tensions are heavily featured here. It's no surprise, really, that when those racial tensions, when you think of the location of the film, the setting of the film. Oakland is widely known for having those racial tensions in real life, and in Blindspotting, the city is pretty much a supporting character of its own. It's one of those movies like Drive or Big Lebowski or Taxi Driver, where the location of the story is just crucial to it, and the atmosphere of the place permeates the film. I like the way that on this canvas that is Oakland, the filmmakers paint this balanced picture that on the one hand tackles the wider issues of stereotypes and social issues in America, but on the other explores the really personal relationship, the personal side of Colin's relationship with Miles, and all the other stuff that happens in his life and he needs to take responsibility for. The movie also, interestingly enough, heavily features rapping, but mostly not on the soundtrack, like on the outside of the story itself, but rather in that the two main characters like to rap themselves. Without music, without audience, just coming up with rhymes for their own pleasure. They rap when driving around, when at work, when hanging out together. And this rapping thing becomes a crucial element of the film, which I also don't want to spoil why, but there comes a point where it just retroactively makes it make more sense beforehand. You can later on see how the slow introduction of rap throughout the film serves a greater purpose and has a payoff. And finally, I want to highlight that the film does an extraordinary job of building tension. There are multiple scenes in it where you just hold your breath and you know something awful is on the verge of happening. And some of those scenes play out scenarios that can be quite, maybe common is not the right word, but not extraordinary themselves if you think about them. For example, one of the early scenes where Colin witnesses the murder, he then looks the cop straight in the eye, and we're suddenly in his shoes. We're suddenly with him in the car, just petrified. What's going on here? What's going to happen now? I haven't done anything wrong, right? Me as in Colin. But I'm black, so who knows if I'm even safe. And those are the scenarios that, if executed poorly, they could have brought the film down, because people, especially like me, who are completely isolated from these issues in real life, would maybe just roll their eyes and go, okay, here we go again. The stereotyped, cliched racial situations where the black guy is the victim. But fortunately, the execution of those moments is flawless, and it's impossible not to empathize with the characters. And for a brief while, know what it's like to be in their shoes. So I think Blindspotting ends up being a really solid movie with great characters, some interesting ideas regarding incorporating rap into the film, some good humor as well, and a couple of fantastic tense moments. I think it's a must see, especially for people who think that the racial issues in America are exaggerated and not as bad nowadays, because it will prove those people wrong by having them experience some of those problems themselves.